about is selfishness of people to take credit. So the best example that I have right now is I was in my condo and I was listening to the news. And on the news, I believe Trump was giving a press conference about taking credit for the economy, which actually I do believe because I was talking to my professor grand uncle, who used to be a professor at SMU in Texas. And so he's excellent at being able to kind of put it together for me in a way that I could understand. And so he said that the economy is doing a lot better under Trump's regime, or his. you know what I'm saying, right? So it's doing a lot better. So regardless of how you feel about Trump, I was surprised to see him taking credit for the whole thing. I mean, he did say that it was his administration, not his regime, his administration, and he didn't want to be, it's kind of like taking credit for everything that everybody's doing, even though it's a team. So it can be seen even in the public arena. And then insecurity. So there's a lot of people who may find barriers to delegation by, they might feel that you might do a better job than they would, and so you're going to be taking their job after everything. So I remember that when I used to work for a director of sales at this company, and it was like one of the best experiences that I've ever had, because she kind of guided me and mentored me through a lot of things, and I thought maybe one day I could be a director of sales, like this lady that I worked for. And then I thought, maybe she'll become like COO of the company, and then we're all moving up. And if she was a different person, she might feel threatened and think, well, she might be doing so well and I don't want to delegate to her because then she might take over my job. She wasn't like that, but that could be an example of how it could be a barrier to delegation. And then reluctance. Does anyone know what that means or how that could be a barrier to delegation? No takers, huh? So this is actually the one that I do a lot, and it's a barrier to my own delegation, is that when I was Lieutenant Governor of Marketing, so that's what the club growth director does now, they build clubs, they really promote the overall health of the organization, and really help the district director out a lot. So one of the things that I did was I had a team, which involved Kyle Nishioka, and I had Deborah Chan. And so that year we did amazing. It was the best team that I've ever had in my entire life. And we did everything. We built clubs together. We put together meetings. I think we did like 9 to 11 corporate visits. And so what I did was use them to the fullest extent that they could give me as far as the time that they had. So much so that at the end of that year, we were all exhausted. It was traumatic for me because I didn't know that I had put so much pressure on everyone to do, they were passionate and they wanted to do this, but by the end of everything, we were all exhausted. And so when it came program quality director year, where you're doing the education, the district conferences for the district, it was already in place with a district conference chair and an education chair. And for me, I just didn't feel like delegating because I had just exhausted my entire team. And I didn't want to do that to anyone else. So then we go to district director year and you're forced to delegate because you have no time to wonder or think it through. You need other people to help you. So I got off that horse real quick. But I learned that by reluctance, it was a barrier to my delegation. And I didn't get as far as I did the first year or the third year of the trio, of being on the trio. So the 5 steps of delegation. You want to prioritize. So a lot of times in my industry, they train you on things like this because they're really big on building teams. The more people that you have working for you, the more balanced everybody's life can be. So prioritizing would be like if you had an assistant. So I had an assistant, and there are certain things that I can only do. There are certain things that I can pass on to her. And so I literally had to think to myself, is this something that I could pass on to Heather? And so I know that sounds simple, except that it's not easy. Because I think to myself, oh no, I don't want to bother Heather, or I think to myself, well, I can do that real quickly. There's all sorts of things that I'm sure you've experienced as well, where you're like, I can do it better, I can do it faster and quicker, versus having to train someone to do it. And I've always believed, actually one of the mentors in my life has said, sometimes you need to go slower in order to go faster. When you take the time to train someone to do the things that maybe that you could pass on, then it sort of works out that you can move faster in the long run. The second step of delegation is to match the needs to availability and ability. So you want to be able to have someone who is knowledgeable, so somebody who kind of knows what they're doing. And if they don't know, inform them of what you want them to do and what you're looking for or the result that you want, and help them to gain knowledge as far as whatever task you're asking them to do. So training is very important. Then there's also motivation. I was working on a team, and it was about 3 or 4 people. And there was someone on the team that I hadn't communicated as well with about my vision and what I was expecting from our team. And so the motivation is very important, because if you don't get everybody on board and it's not a two-way street, then it's sort of your team sort of kind of goes down in their motivation, and you're not as able to get things done as you would if they were. So by explaining sort of where you want to go and taking them through how they can be motivated versus how you motivate, that's one thing that would be very important to matching the needs to availability and ability. And then of course they have to be able. So I was talking to you a little earlier about Deborah Chong and Kyle Nishioka. So Deborah Chong, she has a family. A lot of us have family, and she has a couple of kids that are in high school. And so I wanted to bring her on again, since now I'm not afraid, I'm not reluctant to delegate. I thought I'd bring her on to my team as district director, except for the fact that she wanted to be there for her kids. They're almost graduating high school, and that was very important to her. And so of course, then you would see that she's not able to help me or be on my team because she has other things that are important and that matter to her. So you want to make sure they're able, you want to ask questions and see, because then a lot of times, I don't know if you have been there, where somebody sort of persuades you so much to be on their team and you're like, shucks, I really don't want to, because I don't have time, I don't have the energy, or I have other commitments that right now are more important to me. So the next step of delegation is assigning responsibility. You want to describe the task and expectations. And I thought my husband did a great job when he was getting a group of about 30 people, so good family friends of ours, to be able to build an emu. And this was a period of over months of building this emu, because you needed to get the rocks, you need to dig the hole, you needed to do all sorts of things. You had to cut the keawe down so that you could have the perfect amount. And on the day of, you needed to have all the materials, including the pig, the turkeys, all sorts of things available. And what was really interesting about this group of people is they were a variety of age groups. Some were high school, some were older than I am, and some were younger than I am. And it was just interesting because one of our good family friends, they say the general group energy is that of they're kind of relaxed and lazy. So they don't necessarily like to get out there and dig a hole or put a pig in a fire pit. They don't like to do that. So what Sheldon, my husband, did is that he described the task to everyone who was doing a part. So if it was to shred the turkey once it was out, then they were shredding the turkey. If it was to put on the tarps, there were some men putting on the tarps onto the fire pit, covering everything with tea leaves and everything. So you described the task and his expectations of the result that he wanted, and it was the best form of delegation I've ever seen in my entire life. So that's kind of something that you could do, when you want to build an emu. You want to identify training needs. So again, I had mentioned this group, they're not exactly self-starters. They're not moving in a direction. So they need some training. Plus, who builds an emu? Anybody? How many of you have built an emu? Okay, so 2 other people besides my husband have built an emu in this room full of people. So you understand that you need to identify the training needs and kind of groom them to do their one specific task, and when they're done, help them move and inspire them to another task. Then you want to identify resources. So sometimes that could be, book, like if you're a club president, you can tell your vice president of education, you can find the training manual on www.toastmasters.org, vice president of education, or something like that. Or like with the specific building of the emu, you can say, well, this person has done the shredding of the turkey, so if you have any questions, ask this person, that type of thing. You also want to empower and grant authority. So something that is throughout this is that you want to make sure that you're following up on this. So you're giving the person that you're delegating authority to make decisions. When I was Lieutenant Governor of Marketing, or actually, when I was Program Quality Director, I was in charge of the speaker for the district conference. And the district director at the time, Charles Millay Jr., he was, I would find a speaker, I'd give it to him and say, this is the bio on this person, what do you think? Then I'd wait for a day or two, and he'd get back to me, and then I'd ask the speaker, and the speaker would tell me no. And so that would be my experience. It was rinse, lather, repeat. I think I did it for 3 times. And so eventually, what was great about Charles is that he said, you know what, Karan, just go and pick a speaker out. You don't have to get any approval. I trust you. And so what he did was he empowered me and granted me authority to just go ahead and do it, because he felt that I would do a good job. I felt, wow, he thinks I'm going to do a good job, and I'm going to do a great job for Charles. And so he empowered and granted me authority. Now, of course, you can do that. You still want to make sure that you follow up and that you also give recognition throughout this process. I believe there's a saying that says, praise in public and criticize in private, although I like to think of criticizing as immediate constructive feedback. So you want to empower, grant authority, and then make sure that you follow up and they're doing their task. And sometimes you also want to give them a deadline. Although if they're a self-starter, sometimes, it's done the next day. So we got to find those people. Oh, I already talked about that. You also want to establish accountability. So you want to say that this is the results that I expect, and by this time, if you could have this done for me. And then make sure that they're held accountable for everything. So you could have like a weekly update, a report. That's what I do with my clients. I update them weekly on how their listings are going. Or you could do it monthly. It depends on the timeline of your project or whatever you're doing with this team. So the benefits of delegation. Well, I think we know. You'll get a more involved and empowered workforce. People that will be excited to work for you and motivated, and things get done. They'll move faster, quicker, and this whole time you thought it was you, except it's this team that you've built together. You'll also have increased productivity and quality. So when I was talking about that 1 + 1 = 3, everything's moving forward synergistically together, and imagine if it's your whole team, because 1 + 1 + 1 could be 9. It could be an infinite number of possibilities and strength when you're moving forward and delegating to your team. There's reduced costs, because of course time is money, and if you're moving efficiently and moving together quickly, then there's reduced costs all around. And then you wouldn't even know, it might be like 10 minutes instead of an hour type of thing that you save. Then there's more innovation. So my experience as district director, I had Ken Nishihira as the club growth director, and I'm thinking, club growth director, that's my jam. I can totally do, help Ken build clubs, all of that. And if I was the type of person that had those barriers, then I'd be like, Ken, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna step in. Except that we worked really great as a team together, and I said, Ken, you're handling this. Because also as district director, you don't really have a lot of time anyway to get in there, even though it's the most fun thing for me. And what I found when I'd go attend his meetings is that he would have this entire team. He really empowered people and was able to engage them. And I look at Ken as sort of a quiet leadership, because you didn't know he has all these friends in Toastmasters that want to help him and are already engaged and motivated to assist. So when I was at his first meeting, I got to see who the leaders were that he empowered to be the I think club retention chair, club growth chair, club extension chair, all sorts of things. And so he got creative. He had this whole flow chart and he had a plan of action. Something that, you know, I never thought of, and if I had been micromanaging him or super involved or attempting to do everything for him, would have never happened. And he had, our club growth was at 7 clubs, which I believe is the most we've ever had in 1 year. And imagine if I had stunted his growth and I just did everything. So more innovation, I think that's like my favorite part in all of this. And then there's greater commitment from the team. So when you're engaging and you're empowering and all these good feelings are flowing, you're getting greater commitment from your team to work with you. At the same time, you need to give great commitment to your team. You want to make sure that you're just as committed, if not more, to your team than they are to you. Of course, you want them to be committed. And then you can do great things together, and everything moves quickly, steadily forward because you're working on a team. So you want to empower your team. Never tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity. I think this is one of the best things at delegation, is that when you're able to finally let go, control, you know, your reluctance, all the barriers that we talked about earlier, you'll see their innovation, their creativity. A lot of people grow and become amazing leaders themselves. You're building leaders. And so eventually, you'll really see the full effect of what 1 + 1 = 3 can do for all of you through delegation. Madam Toastmaster.